I stared at the long dining table, perfectly set with polished silverware and glowing candles, the smell of roasted duck and garlic mashed potatoes filling the air. My son had gone all out for this anniversary dinner, a celebration of love, family, and loyalty. But as I stood there, holding the small wrapped gift I'd bought with my pension money, I noticed something strange. 11 chairs, yet only 10 guests. Dad, my son Michael said, stepping toward me, his smile tight, rehearsed. About tonight, there's no seat for you. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him, the words dissolving under the clink of wine glasses and soft jazz playing from the speakers. No seat? I repeated, my voice trembling. Michael, it's our anniversary. Your mother and I built this family. Why would there be no seat for me? Isabella, his wife, placed her manicured hand on his arm. It's just, well, this dinner is for couples. Everyone here is paired. You'd make it uneven. Her tone was sweet as poisoned honey, but her eyes flashed with disdain. I looked around the table. My grandchildren were there. My daughter-in-law's parents were there. Even Michael's best friend and his wife had been invited. The family I had sacrificed everything for. Yet the chair where I should have sat was missing, as if I were already a ghost haunting my own bloodline. Dad, don't make a scene, Michael whispered, lowering his voice but not his condescension. You can sit in the kitchen if you want. There's extra space by the counter. The words hit harder than a fist. Sit in the kitchen. Like a servant. Like a stranger. My gift box, carefully wrapped with trembling hands, suddenly felt heavy. Inside was a vintage watch, one I'd saved for months to buy. I imagined Michael's face when I handed it to him. Imagined gratitude, maybe even pride. But now, holding it in my palm, it felt like a cruel joke. The scent of rosemary bread drifted across the room, but I could taste only bitterness. The walls seemed to close in, as Isabella raised her glass and announced, "To family, to love, and to the years ahead." The table erupted in cheers, clinking glasses together, ignoring the man standing in the doorway. Me, the man who had paid for Michael's education, who had mortgaged his home to keep Michael afloat after his failed business, who had buried his wife alone because Michael had been too busy to come home. And now, on the one night that was supposed to honor what I had built, I was erased. But what Michael didn't know, what none of them knew, was that this insult would be the last one I ever swallowed, because I had already begun planning my revenge. I drove home that night with the radio off, the silence inside my old Buick louder than any music. Streetlights blurred through the windshield as my thoughts replayed the evening again and again, the missing chair, Isabella's smirk, Michael's quiet compliance. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. All around me, houses glowed with warm family dinners, laughter spilling into the night. But inside me, there was nothing but hollowness. This wasn't the first time they'd made me feel unwanted. It was just the first time they didn't even bother to hide it. I still remember when Michael was little, no older than 6. He used to tug at my sleeve and say, "Dad, sit with me. Don't go back to work yet." And I'd stay, reading him one more story, tucking him into bed with promises of a better tomorrow. I thought that sacrificing my sleep, my health, my money would buy me love and respect. But somewhere along the way, Michael learned to take and never give back. After my wife, his mother, passed away, I became the invisible man. At first I convinced myself it was grief, that he just didn't know how to handle the loss. But years passed, and still I was treated like a guest in the very life I had built for him. When Michael's business collapsed, who covered his debts? Me. I took out a second mortgage, draining the last of my savings. I watched him stand tall again, smiling, shaking hands with new investors, as if he had rebuilt everything by himself. He never mentioned my name, not once. When Isabella wanted a bigger house, the house with the marble counters and the high ceilings, I signed the checks. I gave them what little I had left because I believed family meant sacrifice. Every nail, every dollar, every late-night shift was for them. But now I saw the truth. To them, I wasn't a father. I was a wallet with a beating heart. I sat alone at my kitchen table that night, staring at the empty chair across from me. My wife's chair. I could almost see her there, her soft smile, the way she would fold her hands and listen as I talked about my day. She'd warned me once, years ago, not to give Michael everything he asked for. One day, she'd said, her voice gentle but firm, "He'll forget gratitude. Don't let him forget what you've done for him." I hadn't listened. Now her words rang in my ears, sharper than the silence of the empty house. I walked into the living room and picked up the photograph from the mantel. It was from our 30th anniversary, the last one before she got sick. Her eyes, full of warmth and strength, seemed to bore into mine. "Do you see what he's become?" I whispered to the photo. "Do you see what we raised?" Tears burned at the corners of my eyes, but I forced them back. This wasn't the time for weakness. I thought of the dinner table again, their laughter, their toasts, Isabella's false smile, and something inside me hardened. My heart, once heavy with sorrow, shifted towards something colder. I was done begging for a seat at their table. They had forgotten who I was, forgotten what I had built, forgotten the sacrifices carved into these very walls. But I would remind them, slowly, carefully, with precision. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the old leather folder that held my financial records. Bank transfers, mortgage payments, insurance policies, all the proof of what I had given them, piece by piece. Each document was like a scar on my soul, a record of my devotion turned into their entitlement. I laid them out across the table, the papers whispering like old ghosts. And in that moment I knew my revenge wouldn't be loud, it wouldn't be violent, it would be quiet, legal, undeniable. The kind of revenge that would make them choke on the very luxury they had built with my sacrifice. The kind of revenge my wife would have been proud of. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a notification. A group photo from last night had been posted online. There they were, Michael, Isabella, the children, her parents, and the guests, all smiling at the long table, glasses raised, plates of food still steaming. The caption read, "Family is everything. A perfect anniversary dinner." I wasn't in the picture, not even a mention in the caption. It was as if I never existed. Something inside me snapped. I slammed the phone onto the table, the sound echoing through the empty house. My wife's photo shook in its frame, and for the first time, I didn't try to steady it. They had erased me, completely, publicly. And that was the moment I realized I wasn't going to beg for their love anymore. I was going to take back what was mine. I opened the folder again, spreading out the documents until the entire kitchen table was covered. Mortgage payments, tuition bills, medical expenses I had covered. Even the down payment for their house. My name was on everything, proof that their life was built on my shoulders. And yet, last night, they'd asked me to sit in the kitchen. I reached for my coffee mug, but my hands were trembling too much to hold it steady. Instead, I sat back, breathing in the silence. A silence that no longer felt lonely, but calculating. That afternoon, I drove past their house. The driveway sparkled with the shine of Isabella's new SUV, a gift I'd helped pay for last year when Michael said he was short on cash. The lawn was perfectly trimmed, the kind of upkeep I had once done myself before age slowed me down. I parked across the street and just watched. Through the window, I could see them moving about, laughing, carrying on as if nothing had happened. The bitterness in my chest turned into steel. That's when the idea hit me. Not a fleeting thought, not a passing fantasy, but a clear, sharp plan that settled into place like it had been waiting for me all along. They depended on me more than they even realized. The mortgage, the insurance, the little invisible payments that kept their world spinning. I was the one who made it possible. And just like I had given, I could take away. I leaned back in the driver's seat, my fingers tapping the steering wheel. For years, I had been the quiet provider, the man in the shadows who sacrificed so they could shine. But last night proved it. They saw me as nothing. Well, I was about to remind them that nothing can become everything when it's taken away. I started the car, my reflection catching in the rearview mirror. For the first time in years, I didn't see a tired old man staring back. I saw someone dangerous. Not with fists, not with rage, but with patience, with intelligence, with power. Because the truth was simple. I had built their life. And now I was ready to dismantle it, piece by piece. That night, sleep refused to come. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the old clock tick away the hours. Each sound was a reminder that time was slipping through my fingers. For a brief moment, I questioned everything. Was I really prepared to do this? To tear down the life I had built for my only son? The boy I once carried on my shoulders. The boy who used to slip his tiny hand into mine at the park, trusting me to keep him safe? I rolled onto my side, my wife's photograph on the nightstand, staring back at me. Her smile was frozen in time, but her eyes seemed to demand an answer. "What would you have done?" I whispered into the dark. "Would you forgive him? Would you still call this family?" The silence was deafening. My chest tightened. A part of me wanted to believe that Michael would change, that if I confronted him directly, he'd fall into my arms, apologize, and beg for forgiveness. That maybe he was just under Isabella's influence, that deep down he still loved me. But then I remembered the words from last night. You can sit in the kitchen, Dad. And the picture online celebrating family while cutting me out entirely. The hope inside me withered. I pushed myself out of bed and walked into the kitchen. Papers still covered the table, my pen lying across the mortgage documents. I picked it up and held it between my fingers, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. Am I becoming the villain? I thought, my hand shaking. Or am I simply giving them what they deserve? Doubt gnawed at me. I remembered Christmas mornings, Michael's laughter echoing through the house, the way he used to kiss his mother on the cheek after opening a gift. Could I really erase all of that with one cold decision? But then my phone buzzed. A message. From Michael. Dad, hope you got home safe. Sorry if things felt awkward yesterday, but you understand, right? Isabella's parents just expect a certain image. Don't take it personally. I stared at the screen, my hand trembling with rage. Don't take it personally. He had erased me from his life, humiliated me in front of everyone, and yet had the audacity to act as if I were the unreasonable one. The doubt began to fade, replaced by clarity sharper than glass. I set the phone down, opened my notebook, and began to write. Step by step, line by line, the outline of my revenge took shape. If they thought I was invisible, they were about to learn what happens when the invisible man finally speaks. Before I reveal how I put my plan into motion, let me ask you something. What would you have done in my place? If your own child erased you from a family celebration, if years of sacrifice were reduced to nothing more than an inconvenience, would you forgive them, or would you make them face the weight of their betrayal? I know my answer, but I wonder what yours would be. So tell me, drop a comment right now and let me know. Would you walk away quietly, or would you do what I did and take back control of everything they thought they owned? Because what happened next changed not only their lives, but mine forever. The following morning, I sat at the same kitchen table, papers spread out like a battlefield map. The weak sunlight streamed through the blinds, cutting lines across the mortgage documents, insurance policies, and transfer slips that had carried my money into Michael's life for years. For the first time in decades, I didn't see those papers as obligations. I saw them as weapons. I picked up the phone and called the bank. My voice was calm, steady, almost cheerful. Yes, I said, giving them my account information. I'd like to cancel an automatic transfer immediately. The representative asked for the property address, and when I gave it, she paused. Sir, this payment has been active for years. Are you sure you want to stop it? I almost laughed. Completely sure. The click of the keyboard was like a gun being cocked. With that single confirmation number, I had pulled the first thread. The house they called their own? Without me, it would crumble faster than the candles on Isabella's fancy dining table. But I didn't stop there. Insurance was next. For 3 years, both of their cars had been under my policy. Isabella's shiny SUV and Michael's sedan. Hundreds of dollars each month, leaving my account to protect vehicles I would never drive. Remove them both, I told the agent firmly. Effective today. Her polite voice replied, Of course, Mr. Hayes. They'll need to establish their own coverage immediately. Perfect. By noon, the life support system I had quietly kept running for them was disconnected, and the silence after each phone call wasn't empty. It was empowering. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the growing list of confirmation numbers and reference codes. Each one was proof that I was no longer their silent servant. That afternoon, I took a walk. The air was crisp, the smell of fresh-cut grass drifting from nearby lawns. Birds sang from the branches, oblivious to the storm I had just unleashed. For the first time in years, I felt free. But freedom tasted different than I expected. It wasn't sweet. It was sharp, bitter, metallic, like biting down on a coin. Back home, my phone began buzzing. Missed calls, 12 of them by evening. Michael, Isabella, even the home number. I didn't answer. Instead, I poured myself a glass of the good whiskey I'd been saving for years, the one I never allowed myself to touch because every penny had gone to them. The phone rang again. Michael's voice filled my voicemail. Dad, hey, the bank says the mortgage payment didn't go through. Did you change something? Just call me back, okay? We'll sort it out. I let the message sit there, unanswered. A few hours later, another voicemail. His voice no longer calm, but sharp, irritated. Dad, what the hell is going on? They're saying we need to make a full payment by Friday or they'll start proceedings. This isn't funny. Fix it. Fix it. As if I were still his safety net. As if I hadn't just spent the past 30 years fixing every mistake he made. By the end of the week, the messages grew desperate. Isabella's tone shifted from anger to panic. Please, Dad, just tell us what's happening. We can't lose the house. Not now. I turned off the phone and sat in the quiet, letting their fear echo in the silence. For once, they were the ones begging. And I wasn't done yet. Because the mortgage and the cars were only the beginning. By Monday morning, the storm had begun to show its teeth. I was sipping coffee at the diner down the street, the scent of bacon and eggs mingling with the chatter of regulars, when my phone buzzed with another voicemail. This one wasn't just panic, it was terror. Dad, please. They're saying if we don't make the payment, foreclosure will begin. We don't have that kind of money on hand. You can't do this to us. We're family. Family. The word tasted like ash. I stirred my coffee slowly, savoring the bitterness. Family had been the excuse they used every time they bled me dry. Now, suddenly, it was a lifeline they were trying to throw back at me. But I wasn't catching it. Instead, I walked back home and opened my folder again. There was one more string to pull. The credit cards. 3 of them. Michael and Isabella had been authorized users for years, charging thousands to my accounts each month, with promises to pay it back. Promises that, of course, never came. I called the company. My voice didn't shake. Yes, I'd like to remove 2 authorized users, effective immediately. The representative confirmed. Any outstanding balance remains on your account, but no further charges can be made by the removed parties. That's fine, I said, a smile creeping across my face. That's more than fine. By the time I hung up, I knew their little empire was collapsing. Mortgage unpaid, cars uninsured, credit cards cut off. For years, I had been the invisible foundation under their castle. And now, brick by brick, I was pulling it out from beneath them. That evening, they showed up at my door. Through the peephole, I saw Michael first. His perfect suit was wrinkled, his hair unkempt. Isabella stood beside him, her designer coat hanging awkwardly, eyes red as if she'd been crying. I opened the door just enough to let the cold air seep in. Dad, please, Michael said, his voice breaking. Can we come in? We need to talk. I didn't move. Talk about what? Isabella stepped forward, her voice trembling. We made a mistake. We shouldn't have treated you like that. But you can't just leave us like this. We'll lose everything. Her words dripped with desperation. But I saw through them. It wasn't regret. It was fear. I shook my head slowly. You gave me a choice, remember. Sit in the kitchen or disappear. I chose to disappear. Michael's face twisted, anger bubbling beneath the surface. You can't just... Yes, I can, I cut him off, my voice sharp as steel. For 30 years I gave, and you took. You never once asked how I was living, never once thanked me. You erased me from your table, now I'm erasing myself from your life, along with every dollar you thought was yours. The silence between us was heavy, broken only by the sound of Isabella's quiet sobs. Michael tried one last time. Dad, you don't understand. We're not bad people. He just got used to bleeding me dry, I said coldly. But that ends now. I closed the door before they could answer. Their voices rose outside, Michael shouting, Isabella pleading, but I didn't open it again. Instead, I walked back to the table, poured myself another glass of whiskey, and sat in the warm glow of my lamp. For the first time in years, I felt peace. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Because cutting them off financially was one thing. Exposing them for who they truly were would be another. 2 days passed before Michael called again. This time, his voice wasn't angry or panicked. It was cold. Dad, if you don't fix this, we'll take legal action. You can't just pull support like this. The house is in our name now. You don't have the right... I listened in silence, my pulse steady. When he finished, I asked one simple question. Do you remember whose name is on the deed? The pause on the other end was delicious. I could almost hear him flipping through papers, realizing what he should have known all along. The house wasn't theirs. It never had been. I had co-signed, covered the down payment, and technically half of it still belonged to me. You wouldn't, Michael muttered, his confidence cracking. Oh, I would, I said calmly. And I already have. I hung up before he could respond. That night I drove past their house again. Only this time I didn't just watch from the street. I pulled into the driveway, walked up to the front door, and slid an envelope under it. Inside was a copy of the cancellation notices, the mortgage transfer termination, the insurance removal, the credit card revocations, all neatly stapled together. A silent declaration of war. As I walked back to my car, I felt something shift inside me. There was no more hesitation, no more doubt. They had erased me. I was erasing the illusion of their stability. I wasn't just punishing them. I was reclaiming myself. The next morning, I met with a lawyer, a calm, sharp-eyed man named Fletcher, who listened carefully as I explained everything. Decades of financial support, the recent humiliation, the missing chair at the dinner table. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, folding his hands. "Mr. Hayes," he said, "legally speaking, you've been far too generous. You have every right to stop payments. As for the house, with your name still tied to the deed, you have more power than they realize." His words were the final confirmation I needed. "Sell it," I said quietly. "List it as soon as possible." He raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure? This will devastate them." "That's the point." For years I had been trapped in the belief that family meant sacrifice at any cost. But as I signed the paperwork, I felt a strange freedom flood through me. The pen scratched against the page, my signature sealing not just a legal decision, but a transformation. There was no going back now. By the time I walked out of that office, the sky had turned gray, the air heavy with the scent of impending rain. It felt like the world itself was acknowledging what I had done. The man who had once been invisible, who had begged for a chair at the table, was gone. In his place stood someone else. Someone who had nothing left to lose except his revenge. 3 days after I signed the papers with Fletcher, Michael showed up at my door again. But this time, he wasn't angry. He wasn't shouting. He looked soft, almost like the little boy I once knew. "Dad," he said, his voice low, "we need to talk, please." Behind him, Isabella stood quietly, her eyes swollen from tears. Her makeup couldn't hide the sleepless nights. For the first time in years, they looked broken, vulnerable. I let them inside. The house smelled of old wood and dust, a far cry from the polished perfection of their marble counters and chandeliers. Michael glanced around, shifting uncomfortably, as if seeing my world for the first time. "Dad," he began, clearing his throat, "we've been under a lot of stress. The dinner, it wasn't fair to you. Isabel and I, we should have treated you better, and we're sorry." The words hung in the air, heavy and strange. "Sorry." I studied him carefully. The boy who had once clung to my hand after nightmares was gone. In his place was a man who only seemed to remember me when he needed something. Isabella stepped forward. "We can fix this, can't we? You've always helped us before. We can figure something out. We'll make it up to you." Her voice cracked, and for a fleeting second, I almost believed her. Almost. I gestured toward the kitchen table, where the stack of documents still sat. "Do you see those papers? That's 30 years of me fixing things. 30 years of sacrifice. Do you know what I got in return?" Michael's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "You gave me a chair in the kitchen," I continued, my voice calm but cold, "on the night that was supposed to honor the family your mother and I built. That was your thank you." Michael lowered his head, silent. Isabella sniffled, clutching his arm. "But we can change," she whispered. "We can be different. Just don't take the house. Don't take everything." For a moment I let the silence stretch. I watched the flicker of hope in their eyes, the desperate belief that their apology might rewind the clock. Finally, I leaned forward. "You're right. Things can change, but not the way you think." Their eyes lit up, just a spark, the tiniest flame of relief. That was their mistake. Because I wasn't offering them mercy. I was offering them the chance to watch their world unravel in slow motion. "You'll learn to live without my money, without my safety net, without the house you never earned, and maybe one day you'll remember what gratitude feels like." I stood and opened the door, gesturing for them to leave. The flicker of hope in their eyes died instantly. Michael hesitated, his lips parting as if to protest, but Isabella pulled him away, her face pale with realization. They had come searching for forgiveness, for rescue. What they found instead was the truth. The letter came on a Thursday morning, tucked neatly into my mailbox between utility bills and advertisements. At first I thought it was junk, just another envelope with my name typed on the front, but when I opened it, the blood drained from my face. It was from Michael. Not handwritten, not personal. Typed, cold, official.
Dear Dad,
"We've been in touch with our lawyer. Since you've withdrawn financial support, we believe you may not be fit to manage your own affairs. For your own safety and in accordance with state law, we will be filing for conservatorship." I gripped the paper so tightly it crumpled in my hand. Conservatorship. They were trying to declare me incompetent, to strip me of every right, every decision, every ounce of independence I had left. They weren't just desperate, they were cornered animals, and this was their attempt to bite back. For a moment, fear clawed at me. What if a judge believed them? What if, after everything, they actually succeeded in making me their prisoner? I sat heavily at the kitchen table, the smell of cold coffee lingering from the night before. My hands shook as I spread the letter flat, forcing myself to read every word. Their lawyer claimed I was forgetful, financially reckless, prone to irrational decisions. Lies, every single one. But suddenly, I remembered the dinner. Isabella's smug face, Michael's whispered words. "You can sit in the kitchen, Dad." They had already tried to erase me from their family. Now they wanted to erase me from myself. I almost laughed. Because what they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that I had already prepared for this. Weeks earlier, after the anniversary dinner, I'd met with Fletcher not just about selling the house, but about protecting my estate. Together, we'd drawn up ironclad documents, proof of my competence, medical evaluations confirming my mental clarity, and a new trust that put every asset firmly under my control. If they wanted a war, I was ready. I picked up the phone and dialed Fletcher. When I told him about the letter, he chuckled softly. "Let them try," he said. "Judges see these kinds of cases all the time. Entitled children trying to steal from their parents. They don't usually end well for the children." Relief washed over me, but beneath it was something sharper, excitement. They thought they were setting a trap for me, but in reality, they had just stepped into mine. That evening, I drove past their house again. Through the window, I saw them at the dinner table, heads close together, papers spread out in front of them, planning, plotting, believing they were clever. I smiled to myself, the cool night air filling my lungs. Because the truth was, every move they made only tightened the noose around their own necks. And soon, when the house sale went through, they wouldn't just lose their mortgage, they'd lose the roof over their heads. The conservatorship letter was supposed to scare me. Instead, it lit a fire I hadn't felt in years. They had turned this into a game of survival, and they were about to learn that I played to win. Before I tell you how I turned their legal attack against them, I want you to stop and think. Imagine giving your entire life to someone, your money, your home, your sacrifices, only for them to try and declare you incompetent. What would you do if your own children tried to steal not only your legacy, but your very freedom? Would you forgive them? Would you still call them family? Or would you fight back, even if it meant destroying the empire you had built with your own hands? Because that's exactly the choice I faced. And believe me, what came next was not just revenge, it was justice. So stay with me, because the next part of my story is where everything explodes. The courtroom smelled faintly of polished wood and old paper, a mix that carried both history and judgment. I sat at the long oak table beside Fletcher, my lawyer, while Michael and Isabella sat across the aisle, whispering furiously with their attorney. The bailiff's voice echoed, "All rise." The judge entered, his robe swaying as he settled into his seat. "We are here today to hear the petition for conservatorship filed by Michael Hayes and his wife Isabella Hayes regarding their father, Richard Hayes." Their lawyer stood first, his tone dripping with fake concern. "Your Honor, my clients only seek what is best for Mr. Hayes. He has shown signs of forgetfulness, financial recklessness, and difficulty managing his own affairs. He recently cut off vital payments without warning, jeopardizing his own housing stability and theirs." I almost laughed out loud at the last part. Their stability. But I stayed quiet, my hands folded neatly on the table. Then it was Fletcher's turn. He rose slowly, adjusting his glasses, his voice calm but cutting. "Your Honor, what you will hear today is not the story of an incompetent man. It is the story of adult children attempting to strip their father of his independence in order to access assets they did not earn. We have evidence of decades of financial support Mr. Hayes provided, as well as proof that he remains fully competent in every legal and medical sense." He placed a thick binder on the judge's desk with a satisfying thud. Inside were the documents I had prepared weeks earlier. Medical evaluations, notarized statements, financial records, and even recordings of Michael admitting he relied on my money. The judge leafed through the binder, his eyebrows lifting slightly. "Let's proceed," he said. Michael was called to the stand first. He walked stiffly, his expensive suit suddenly looking too tight. His lawyer guided him with gentle questions, trying to paint me as frail and confused. "Mr. Hayes," the lawyer asked, "can you tell the court why you believe your father needs conservatorship?" Michael cleared his throat. "Because he's not the man he used to be. He makes rash decisions. He cut off our mortgage without any discussion. He's reckless." "Reckless?" Fletcher interjected smoothly. "Would you call paying for your college tuition reckless? Or covering your debts after your failed business? Or financing your current home's down payment? Michael's face flushed red. That was different. Different how? Fletcher pressed. Michael faltered, glancing at Isabella, who avoided his gaze. The courtroom was silent, except for the creak of chairs as people leaned forward, hungry for drama. I sat still, my heart pounding, but I didn't need to say a word. Fletcher was dismantling them piece by piece, and the cracks were showing. Finally, the judge raised a hand. I've heard enough for now, Mr. Hayes Sr. Do you wish to make a statement? All eyes turned to me. I stood slowly, the weight of years and betrayal heavy on my shoulders, but my voice, when it came, was steady. Yes, Your Honor, I said. I have something to say. The entire courtroom leaned closer, because what I was about to reveal wasn't just about Michael and Isabella's greed. It was about exposing the truth of who they really were in front of everyone. I stepped up to the witness stand, my palms brushing against the polished wood rail. The courtroom lights felt hot on my face, but my voice was cool, steady, deliberate. Your Honor, I began, for 30 years I gave my son everything he ever asked for. His education, his business bailouts, his home. I worked double shifts, sold my own belongings, and mortgaged my future so he could build his. I turned my gaze toward Michael. His eyes dropped immediately. And how was I thanked? On the night of my wedding anniversary, a dinner I should have been honored at, my son told me I didn't have a seat at the table. He asked me to sit in the kitchen like a servant, like I was nothing. A ripple of shock moved through the courtroom. Even the judge leaned forward slightly. I took a breath, letting the silence build. That was the night I realized I hadn't raised a son. I'd raised an entitled man, who saw me only as a wallet with a heartbeat. Fletcher handed me a stack of documents, and I lifted them so the judge could see. Here are the records of every payment I made. Mortgage transfers, tuition, car insurance, credit cards, proof that I funded not just their comfort, but their survival. The judge flipped through the evidence, nodding slowly. Then Fletcher pressed play on a small recorder. Michael's voice filled the room, cold and unmistakable. It's time to put him in a home. He's becoming a burden. With the house on the market, we could finally buy the one in Boulder. Gasps echoed through the room. Isabella's face went pale as marble. Michael's fists clenched on the table, his entire body stiff. The judge held up a hand. Is this authentic? Yes, Your Honor, Fletcher confirmed. Recorded by Mr. Hayes himself. We have verified its integrity. The silence that followed was crushing. For once, Michael had no words. I leaned closer to the microphone, my voice low but cutting. My son thought he could erase me. Instead, he erased himself. Because from this day forward, I will never again be the man who begs for a seat at his table. I built that table, and I've decided he doesn't deserve to sit at mine. The judge slammed his gavel once. Petition denied. Mr. Hayes retains full independence. Furthermore, I strongly advise your clients, Mr. and Mrs. Hayes Jr., to consider the consequences of their actions. The courtroom erupted with murmurs. Reporters scribbled notes. Strangers shook their heads in disbelief. Michael sat frozen, his face ashen. Isabella buried her face in her hands. And me? I stood tall. For the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't erased. I was heard. The air outside the courthouse was crisp, filled with the low hum of traffic and the chatter of onlookers who had witnessed every moment of the trial. Reporters clustered near the steps, microphones raised, but I walked past them without a word. I didn't need to explain myself. The evidence had spoken louder than anything I could say. Behind me, Michael and Isabella emerged, their faces tight with fury and shame. The same people who once admired their polished image now whispered and pointed, shaking their heads. In a single afternoon, their reputation had crumbled. I climbed into my car, the leather seat creaking under my weight, and sat there for a moment. For the first time in years, I felt light. The invisible chains that had tied me to their demands were gone. That night, Fletcher called. His voice carried a note of satisfaction. The house listing has already drawn interest. We could have it under contract within a week. I swirled the last of my whiskey in the glass, the amber liquid catching the lamplight. Do it, I said simply. And just like that, their last illusion of stability vanished. Within days, foreclosure notices arrived at their door. Their cars, now uninsured, were repossessed after missed payments. Creditors began calling, their patience as thin as the smiles Michael and Isabella used to wear. They had built their castle on my back, and now without me it was collapsing brick by brick. But here's the thing. I didn't feel joy watching them fall. Not exactly. What I felt was something colder. Finality. Justice. One evening, I passed by their house, soon to be my house again. Once the sale closed, Michael was on the porch, his head in his hands, while Isabella shouted into the phone, her voice hoarse and desperate. The perfect couple, once admired by neighbors, now looked like shadows of themselves. I didn't stop. I didn't wave. I simply drove on, the soft hum of the engine drowning out their misery. Back home, I placed my wife's photograph on the kitchen table. For years I had talked to her picture in whispers, but that night I spoke aloud. "You were right," I said softly. "We gave him too much, and he forgot who made it possible." Her smile in the photo seemed almost alive in the lamplight. I raised my glass toward her. "But he'll never forget again." A week later, Fletcher confirmed the sale. The check arrived by courier, thick, heavy, undeniable. I deposited it without hesitation, securing my future at last. Michael tried calling one last time. His voice was ragged on the voicemail. "Dad, please, we can start over. We'll do better. Just don't leave us like this." I deleted it without listening to the end. Because starting over wasn't an option. The line had been crossed, the bridge burned. They had erased me from their table, and I had erased their false empire in return. And strangely, I didn't feel alone anymore. For the first time in years, I wasn't living in the shadow of their expectations. I was living for myself and for the memory of the woman who had warned me this day would come. The weeks after the trial and the sale of the house felt strangely quiet. Not empty, not bitter, just quiet. For the first time in decades, I no longer woke up to a list of obligations that revolved around Michael and Isabella. No more mortgage transfers. No more insurance payments. No more quiet resentment over bills I didn't owe. My mornings became mine again. I'd brew a pot of coffee, the smell filling my small kitchen, and sit by the window watching the sunrise. The silence that once felt suffocating now felt like freedom. I began to notice things I'd forgotten. The way the light caught on the dust in the air, the sound of birds waking up, the creak of my old chair as I leaned back and just breathed. I wasn't the same man who had stood, invisible, at the doorway of that anniversary dinner. That man had been desperate for love, willing to buy respect with sacrifice. This man, this new version of myself, knew better. I used part of the money from the sale to renovate my house. Nothing extravagant, just repairs I'd put off for years while pouring everything into Michael's life. Fresh paint on the walls, new tiles in the kitchen, a sturdy roof that didn't leak when it rained. Every improvement felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Neighbors began stopping by, curious about the changes. For years, I'd kept to myself, weighed down by shame and exhaustion. But now, I found myself inviting them in, pouring coffee, sharing stories. I was no longer the invisible old man at the end of the street. I was part of the community again. And slowly, I began to feel something I hadn't in years: connection. One evening, I visited the cemetery. The sun was setting, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink as I walked to my wife's grave. I laid fresh lilies on the stone, brushing away the leaves that had gathered. "I did it," I whispered, my voice breaking just slightly. I finally stood up. I didn't let him erase me. The wind stirred through the trees, carrying the faint scent of pine. For a moment I swore I could hear her voice again, the way she used to encourage me when I doubted myself. I smiled. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't talking to her memory. I was talking to her pride. Michael and Isabella. I never saw them again. Word spread quickly through town about the courtroom scene, about the recording, about the sale of the house. Whatever reputation they had left was gone. They moved out quietly, disappearing from the neighborhood like ghosts. And me, I didn't chase after them. I didn't check where they went or what became of them. That part of my life was finished. What mattered now was the man I had become. I had thought revenge would feel like fire, like an inferno of satisfaction burning away years of pain. But instead, it felt like cool water, steady, cleansing, inevitable. I wasn't consumed by it. I was freed by it. Because revenge wasn't just about taking something from them. It was about giving something back to myself. Dignity, respect, peace. As the days stretched into weeks, I found myself smiling more. I started gardening again, planting herbs and tomatoes in the backyard. The smell of fresh soil on my hands reminded me of the early days of my marriage, when my wife and I had built a life together from nothing. I realized then that this was my true transformation. I wasn't just a man who had gotten even. I was a man who had rediscovered himself. And for the first time in a long time, I was proud. Proud not of what I had given away, but of what I had reclaimed. Looking back now, I realized something important. Revenge wasn't about destroying my son's life, it was about reclaiming my own. For years, I let myself believe that love could be bought with sacrifice. But the truth is simple: love that demands your silence, your money, your dignity, isn't love at all. I learned that sometimes the most powerful act of revenge is not anger, not shouting, not even punishment. It's choosing yourself over those who would erase you. So let me ask you, if you were in my shoes, would you have done the same? Would you have fought back, even if it meant burning bridges forever? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to hear your thoughts. And remember, never let anyone make you invisible.